Hi everyone, this is Nathan from Snap, and today we're going to be looking at the use of logical expressions in Snap and their use within analysis filters. We'll also be looking at how these same expressions can be utilised within routing rules. It should take about 20 minutes, and as ever there is plenty of further resources available which I'll be pointing you to at the end. We're going to be using SnapXMP, our new seamlessly integrated platform which has got three main components to it. Snap Desktop, which is installed on your PC or laptop, Snap Online, our cloud-based application, and for those of you who might be doing any field-based interviewing, so face-to-face interviewing, we've also got the Snap Offline Interviewer app. Today I'm going to be using Snap Desktop to demonstrate the use of these logical expressions, but the same expressions can also be applied within Snap Online. For those of you who perhaps aren't familiar with this topic, analysis filters are used in data analysis to examine a specific subset of respondents rather than all the respondents in a survey. So for example, perhaps a particular demographic. So today I'll be demonstrating some of the ways in which these logical expressions can be applied. We'll begin with the basics and then move on to some expressions that you might not have seen before, specifically around some multiple response questions and also date response questions. As mentioned, the expressions and syntax used in analysis filters are very similar to those that are used in routing. And again, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, routing is used in the questionnaire design to ensure that respondents are only asked questions which are relevant to them, and questions that aren't are skipped. Again, we'll start off with the basics and then progress to some more elaborate uses of these expressions, combining them with the use of a derived variable. Let's head into Snap Desktop to begin. I'm going to be using the in-crowd survey, which has got 160 cases, all completed replies. You can see I've got three web editions at the bottom, the PC, tablet and smartphone, and there's also a paper edition. But in terms of analysis, data's data, so it really doesn't matter how the data gets into the survey. I'm going to move into the Analysis tab today, which is just an extra edition that I've created and formatted with the checkboxes on the right, but just confirm this edition isn't actually used for interviewing. It just allows me to perhaps use bigger fonts, etc. to make the analysis slightly easier to view. Now you're probably aware that when it comes to analysis and also routing, we use the position or code to determine which answer it is that we're referring to. So answer yes is code 1 and answer no is code 2. And just to confirm, each question starts back at number 1. So for question 2, once before is code 1 again. In larger questions, rather than having to manually count the codes, if I was to click on a few times a year, it's useful to make use of the selection bar at the bottom. So you can see it's question 2, but more importantly code 3. And you can see it also tells me the response type. So question 2 is a single response. Moving on to filter expressions, the most basic or simple expressions are based upon responses to just one question. If I move into data view mode and drop down the menu to counts, you can see I now have the results for 160 people. So 99 people said yes and 59 people said no. And if we come down to the demographic section, so question 8 and 9, you can see we have 37 males, 82 females and 37 people said they prefer not to say. But I'll now go ahead and apply a filter, and in there I'm going to type Q8 equals 2. So 2 identifying the females, and if I click OK, you can see I'm now just looking at my 82 females, and just to confirm, the remainder of this survey is just the results of those 82 females. So the 11 18 to 24 year olds are part of those 82 females. If I wanted to then reference an age group of those females, so perhaps the 29 to 39 year olds, which would be Q9 equals 2, we can then join these short expressions together using operators, which are either in the form of words or symbols. So I'm going to start off using words, and if I click back on the filter, I can just add the word and then Q9 equals 2, so the 25 to 39 year olds. And if I click OK, so by using AND, we're saying that both filter expressions have to be true. So the participants identified have to be both female and 25 to 39. If I was to change the expression to an OR, then we get a completely different result. So now we're saying that the participants identified can either be female or aged 25 to 39. They can also be both. Basically, pick out anyone who's at least one of these things. Unlike and, or can be used to filter multiple answer choices within a single response variable. So if I go back into my filter, and this time I'm just going to filter based on question 9. So if I initially say Q9 equals 1 and Q9 equals 2, if I click OK, you'll see I get no results. And that's because when completing the survey, it's impossible to choose both of those options. I can choose option 1 or option 2, but what I cannot do is choose both options. So this time if I replace the word and with an or, you should see I get some results. If I then wanted to also include the 40 to 59-year-olds, I can simply add another or at the end. So or Q9 equals 3. This could also be expressed as not Q9 equals 4. So show me everyone who did not choose option number 4. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these expressions can also use operator symbols. I'm going to move back into my PowerPoint to show you a few examples. So starting off with our first example, we said Q9 equals 1 or Q9 equals 2 or Q9 equals 3. The equivalent symbol to the word or would be a comma. So Q9 equals 1, comma, Q9 equals 2, comma, Q9 equals 3. This could be shortened down with the use of brackets. So we could say Q9 equals, and then in brackets 1, comma 2, comma 3, and then close brackets. And as we saw, rather than saying display options 1, 2 and 3, sometimes it's quicker to say don't display option number 4. If you're perhaps a bit more used to playing with these types of expressions in Excel, then you might be more familiar with the greater or less than symbols. So we could also say Q9 is less than or equal to 3. Or finally, we could say Q9 is less than 4. So here we've identified the same respondents, so everyone in the first 3 age groups, but expressed in 6 different ways. And using the shorter expressions help to avoid mistakes when you start to build up these more complex expressions. Now, I just wanted to show you a couple of filters that are used specifically for multiple response questions. Using num, so N-U-M as the operator word, means that I can identify respondents who gave more than one response to question 3. So this would be expressed as num Q3 greater than 1. And because num is used, the number 1 at the end isn't referring to option number 1, it's referring to the number of responses to that question. It may also be useful to identify respondents who selected one specific response to a multiple response question. So Q3 equals 1 identifies those who exclusively chose social media as their response and nothing else. The examples I've shown you so far have all been based on closed tick box questions, but you can also apply filters to all open style questions too. So for example, date response questions can use expressions based on year, month and even weekdays. My first expression is searching for a particular date range, and now this can be useful if you're filtering based on financial quarters, although in this particular example I'm searching for the entire 2021. And it's also just worth pointing out that I've used dots in between my days, months and years. You can use forward slashes, dashes, you can use the word October. It really doesn't matter how you type your date, just as long as it is a recognisable date expression. My current expression could be shortened down by making use of the word year. So Q10 year equals 2021. And by making use of the word and then month, we can also search for the first 3 months of the year. So year equals 2021 and month equals 1 tilde 3. Remembering tilde is just the same expression as the word to. If you're doing comparisons based upon days of the week, you could also make use of the word weekday. So weekday equals 1 is Monday and weekday equals 7 would be a Sunday. And we can try and automate it a little using the word today. So Q10 today month would pick out anyone who's arrived this particular month. And then if we followed that with Q10 today month -1, that will pick out those who arrived last month. So it will be dynamically picking out the current month or the previous month. For literal response questions, we could use the expression Q6 equals and then in speech marks friendly staff. So that will pick out anyone that's used that string. And if you're doing any work with time response questions, then just like the word year and month, you can also make use of hour and minute. So we've seen that operator words and symbols can be used to join multiple filter expressions together, and really there's no limit to that, as filter expressions can be hundreds of characters long. Whilst this means that you can be really specific in identifying participant responses, the longer the expression becomes, the more likely it is that you're going to need to make use of a number of different types of operators. So for example, we could say Q8 equals 2 and Q9 equals 3, or Q2 equals 2, or Q4a equals 1, 2 in brackets, and Q3 equals 1. The problem, however, is that logical expressions can't simply be joined together like this, because it could be interpreted in slightly different ways. Let's move into a slightly simpler example. So I'm looking for the males who are either aged 18 to 24 or 25 to 39. Q8 will identify the males, and Q9 equals 1 or Q9 equals 2 will identify the participants who are aged 18 to 24 or 25 to 39. The issue here is the fact that I'm using and or in the same sentence, and the two operators will just conflict as we don't know which question they're going to apply to. It could be interpreted as either the males aged 18 to 24 or 25 to 39, or perhaps it could be read as the males aged 18 to 24 or any respondent who's aged 25 to 39. But the good news is this can all be sorted out using brackets. So Q9 equals 1 and then the next section in brackets Q9 equals 1 or Q9 equals 2. So we're bracketing the parts of the filter to which the word or applies. To give another example, let's say I also wanted to include the females who were aged 60 or over. So here the brackets are used to isolate the two parts of the expressions, so isolating the two separate groups of people, and then or is used to join the two groups together. So I'm looking for anyone who belongs to either the first group or they belong to the second group. Okay, so there were some examples of filter expressions used in data analysis. I now wanted to look at some similar expressions which can be used within routing. So I'm going to head back into Snap Desktop, and I'm going to move into a new survey, so the customer feedback survey. Looking at question 1, or more importantly question 1a, the please specify, you can see I've got some routing set up already. So if I double click on that, you can see that we have Q1 equals 7, so the please specify will only pop up on the condition that the response to question 1 was option number 7, so the other. If we then come down to questions 4 and 5, I've got some fairly similar routing set up where I'm asking people for question 4 to rate the cleanliness, reliability and frequency on a scale of very good to very poor. And then question 5 is asking for a little bit more information about the cleanliness, but it's set up to say only ask them more information if people respond poor or very poor. So if we look at the routing for question 5, you can see it's only going to pop up on the condition that the response to question 4b, so the cleanliness, was option poor or very poor. And as you can see, it's using exactly the same expressions as we used just a few moments ago in the analysis side of things. Now, if we head back to question 1 and 2, so as we saw, we had the routing to say make the please specify pop up if they tick other. But then looking at question 2, you can see how many times a week do you visit, and we've inserted the response from question 1 into the question text of question 2. But if I go ahead and preview that one, if I choose Asda, Morrison's and other and type in super save and press next, you can see it's inserted Asda and Morrison's, but it hasn't taken the word super save, it's simply taken the last answer. So to resolve that, we'll head back into Snap Desktop, and if I go into my variables window, I've already created a derived variable called v1, so let's have a quick look at that one. So it's a multiple response question, just like question 1. You can see we've got all our answers that we had in question 1, and if I go into the toggle definitions, you can see that it's getting its data from question 1. So question 1 equals 1 is for Asda, question 1 equals 2 is for Marks and Spencer's. But instead of inserting the word other for option number 7, I'm going to delete that text out, and instead we're going to insert the reply from question 1a, from the please specify. So if I drop down the menu and choose question 1a, and as I said, it's going to be the reply, and click OK. So the text from question 1a will dynamically be inserted into the response of v1. If we then click the save button, head back into the design window, and I'll delete Q1, which I've got there at the moment, and instead insert variable field, and this time rather than inserting Q1 I will insert V1, and again it's the reply. So that will take the text from Q1, but as we saw, it's also going to be taking the text from question 1a. So I'll save that and preview it again. So again, I will choose Asda, Morrison's and super save. And when I press next, you can see it's inserted the correct options. And while we're here, if I go ahead and complete the rest of the survey, you can see if I give a response of cleanliness poor or very poor, I'm then asked the additional question 5, tell me a bit more information about the cleanliness. Okay, the final example I wanted to show you today was based around displaying sets of questions randomly, which is a question which gets posed quite a bit to our help desk. So for this one, we're going to head back into Snap Desktop and we're going to move into the course evaluation survey. And for this we will be making use of a variable hiding in the background called id.start. So that's a question built into each and every question which automatically records the time that each person starts the survey. And I'll be using another derived variable called v1, and this will dictate one of 3 potential routes that people will go down based upon what time they start the survey. And as you can see, I'm making use of id.start, so if anyone starts within the first 20 seconds of any given minute, then they will go down route 1. If they start somewhere between 20 seconds and 39 seconds, they will go down route number 2. And I'm making use of the term true for route number 3, which basically says if someone doesn't fall into category 1 or 2, then they will fall into category 3. So strictly speaking, this isn't actually randomising the routes they're going to head down, it's just based upon what time they start the survey. But it should still produce a fairly good spread of routes taken by each of your respondents. And if we go back into the questionnaire design window and click on my introduction and up to routing, you can see I've got some go to after routing on this introduction. So anyone who answers in the first 20 seconds of any given minute will be taken down route number 1, so they go straight to question number 1. Anyone who chooses to click on your link between 20 to 40 seconds of any given minute will be taken to N3, so that's note number 3, which is just one of my subheaders, and then ultimately they go on to question number 5. And then anyone who doesn't belong to route number 1 or 2 will be taken off to N4, again, and a final sort of subheader, which ultimately is question number 11. So if we initially look at route number 1, so they're going to go to Q1 to begin with, and you can see, just to make it obvious what's happening, I've actually just put some actual text in there just to make it easier to sort of describe what we're doing today. And then at the end of that little section, which is actually question number 4, I've actually got some additional routing. So if I go into my pointy arrow, and if I double click on the routing this time, after they've answered question 4, we want them to skip straight to my thank you message, which is N5, so the very last thing in the survey. And then if we come down, we can see we've got route number 2, again at the end of route number 2, which is question 10b, some more routing to skip people to the thank you message at the end. And then finally, for route number 3, we don't need any routing this time on question 14 because naturally it will take them straight into the thank you message anyway. Okay, that was everything I had planned to show you for now. I appreciate that some of my example surveys today were perhaps a little bit crude in the design and the wording, but hopefully it has given you an idea of how those different expressions can be used both within your analysis but also within your questionnaire design. As mentioned, there is plenty of additional support available to you, and I've picked out a couple of specific help pages from our support hub, which will go through a few similar examples that we've been looking at today, but perhaps in a little bit more detail. And of course, remember that we are always on the end of the phone or email, whether that's accessing our help desk or perhaps booking onto one of our training courses. Or if you are short of resources or would just like a little helping hand, our research department can assist you with any aspect of your project, from simple data entry jobs right through to complete project management. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.